Thank you for joining me for another Sunday Afternoons with Reverend Lucretia. I'm so glad you're here. And so the name of today's talk is No More Feeding the Fear. And the song is Stand By Me, and the version is by Skylar Gray. If you'd like to listen to the song before you hear the talk, just go ahead and click on the link. It will be down below in the description. So we're going to be talking about how to overcome your fears. We're going to be talking about why you should define your fears instead of your goals. We will be discussing Eric Butterworth and the new thought beliefs that when you are living in fear, you are actually participating in error thinking. Fear is an illusion that is of your own making. We will be talking quite a lot about scriptural references to fear and being not afraid. We'll be talking about how to analyze, dissect, tear apart your fears so that you can take away their power. Remember at all times that God is with you. You are more powerful, courageous, smart, resilient than you ever give yourself credit for. You can do all things through the God's power that lives inside of you. So we're going to be talking about the fact that believing in fear is error thinking. So we're going to start off on this take called How to Overcome Fear by Trevor Reagan. So he is an entrepreneur, a coach, a teacher, a lecturer, and he specializes in learning how people can expand and be their best and highest selves by learning more. And he says, why do we hate getting out of our comfort zone so much? The biggest hurdle to becoming a great learner is fear. It's the fear of looking bad, or fear of the unknown, or fear of messing up. Fear is wired into us. So we've talked about it before. It's in the amygdala. It is the part of the brain that is the back of your brainstem, and it is what's called the lizard's brain. It is there for survival. It generates fear so that it can steer us away from danger. Problem is, it doesn't know the difference between good challenges and dangerous ones. And so its tactic is to avoid risk at all costs during all times. So there are 4 triggers that makes the amygdala, the lizard's brain, go wacko out of control, and they are uncertainty, attention, change, and struggle. They are present in dangerous situations, but they are also present in the best learning situations. So when we feel fear, we find a way to avoid doing the thing, and that is excellent for danger, but it is not very good if we are trying to learn new information and new skills. It is why we don't ask questions when we are in a group. We're afraid of looking bad. We're afraid of messing up. We're afraid that people will focus their attention on us and we'll feel stupid. It's a small moment, but it has to stretch us out of our comfort zone, and if we are feeling that much fear, we won't ask any questions. Procrastination is also coming from the amygdala, why we don't do the things that we want to do when we need to do them. So the brain, that part of the brain, only thinks in black and white. There's no gray areas. And so I can struggle right now, or I can not struggle, and the brain is always going to choose to not struggle. So sometimes what we do, what's called downgrading the struggle. So we stay busy, we choose an option which has less risk attached to it. So we're telling ourselves that we're accomplishing something because we're doing things that aren't really that big of a challenge for us, as opposed to taking a risk and doing something where we're learning something that's going to make us grow. So we're playing a different game now than we were in the ancient times. In the ancient times, we were playing the survival game, and the brain worked to do this because it was necessary. The fact of the matter is, we're not in survival mode most of the time, but we still have the same software, is how he describes it. So the brain hasn't changed that much in that way. The lizard brain is a force that's driving our behavior, making our decisions. It robs us of opportunities to grow, avoiding uncertainty, struggle, and change. So Trevor says that he's spoken to hundreds of groups around the world. He teaches Major League Baseball in schools, Fortune 500 companies. He's always been in prisons as well. And he always asks the question, when has fear robbed you of the opportunity to grow? And what he says is that 100% of the time, every single person that he asks can admit to the fact that fear has done that. That there is something that you wanted to do, that you could do, or that you should do, that you end up avoiding so that you can stay in your comfort zone. So he talks about this high school student that was going for an audition. She was going to be on The Voice, and she had gone through several different rounds. She was actually at the very, very last round, and she got so nervous that she left. She didn't even finish the audition. And so fear was robbing many of us of potential outcomes. But it also robs us of the experience, which is where all the growth is. And so the fact that she left before she even got to do the final cut just robbed her of the experience of what that would have been like. So he has mentors that he's been studying with, and he asked one of his mentors, how do you get rid of the fear? How do you remove the fear so that you can be good at learning? And his mentor said, if you're seeking to destroy, defeat, conquer the lizard brain, you will fail. The brain is nothing but a chemistry experiment. Electricity and chemicals. When you push back on the lizard brain, it freaks out and it inflames. What you can do is what he calls dance with the lizard brain. It's like a compass. When it freaks out, you're on to something, that you're about to do something which is brave and bold and powerful. So use it like a compass to tell you when you're actually expanding and growing is when your lizard brain is going to freak out the most. You should listen to it and do the exact opposite of what it tells you to do. So dancing with fear is brilliant if we know that the lizard never wants us to get out of our comfort zone. We see it as a signal that we are in a learning experience. I've done 180, he says. He used to teach people to be fearless and not be afraid, but now that he understands all of this about the lizard brain, he understands why that approach actually doesn't work at all. So there are two reasons why it doesn't work. Number one, in telling someone to be fearless, we are telling them to do something that can't be done. If it's doing something that involves uncertainty, struggle, attention, meaning people are focusing their attention on you, or change, there's going to be fear. And the only way to feel no fear is to not do it, or to not care about it, or to hold back from what you want. If I care and I do it and it involves uncertainty, struggle, attention, or change, I'm going to feel fear. You can name it whatever you want, but that feeling is still going to be there. And number two, that approach doesn't work because it creates shame around the fear. And this can make it worse. If everyone is telling you you're not supposed to feel fear, you will have shame. I'm not supposed to be feeling this. Something must be wrong. I must not be ready. And that just makes the fear even worse. So the big upgrade that we are trying to do is to make us to understand that the feeling the fear before anything that stretches and challenges us doesn't mean that something's wrong. It doesn't mean that we're not ready. It means we're human. We assume that the presence of fear means I can't or shouldn't do this. With the upgraded approach, you're more likely to do the thing which helps us to learn and grow and get better at it. Give yourself permission to feel the fear totally changes the way that you do things. Dancing with fear is a skill. So the more we do it, the better we get. The fear doesn't go away, but it's a skill that we can all get better at, he says. So he refers to Liz Gilbert in her book, Big Magic. She talks about the fact that she wrote a letter to fear, and she said that she had to put the fear in the back seat, knowing that you can't kick it out of the car. When the lizard is at the wheel, it detects learning and opportunities as threats. If you put the lizard in the back seat, we realize that most of the things we are afraid of are opportunities for growth. Do them, experience them, learn from them, grow, and get better. In treating this as a skill, we start to get reps, and the practice of feeling fear and going out of the comfort zone becomes what we do on a natural basis. Be aware of the process and our choices and work to spend a little more time outside our comfort zone, and that is something that we can all do. So I wanted to give us some really specific tools about what can we do so that we can deal with this fear thing. And what I found was this talk that's called Why You Should Define Your Fears Instead of Your Goals. And it was given by Tim Ferriss. And he talks about the fact that if you can define what your fears are and dissect them and analyze them and tear them apart, you're actually going to take away all of their power. So he talks about he was a senior in college and he put up a picture of himself. It was a YouTube talk. And he put up a picture of himself and he was very, very happy. He had just come from dance practice. He had been with his girlfriend and he's got this big smile on his face. And he said a week and a half later, he was in the back of a used minivan and he was having suicidal thoughts that were getting very, very close to actually having a plan that he was going to go through. He said it was the closest I've ever come to the edge of the precipice. So he became methodical about measuring ways to track the ups and downs. So most normal people have 6 to 10 depressive episodes in their lifetimes. He said he'd already had 50 plus because he's got bipolar depression disorder. And he learned a lot about how to deal with these fears and how he could get past them. And so one of the things he did, that he found this tool, and it's called Stoicism. You've probably heard of this before. It's a means of mental training and operating system for thriving in high stress environments so that we can make better decisions. So it was first started in 300 BC in Athens, Greece, by a man named Zeno, and he taught it while he was walking around his porch, which is a stoa, and that's how it got to be called Stoicism. So it's training yourself to separate what you can control to what you cannot control. And exercises gives you to focus on all of those things that you can control. So when he was young, he had his first major business. He was working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and his girlfriend left him. She said, I'm done. You don't do anything at work. We don't have any fun together. We don't do anything that is wonderful. And so I need for you to know that I can't live like this anymore. And so she walked out on him. At that point in time, he also lost a very, very good friend of his that was his age, so very young, to pancreatic cancer. And this all happened very, very quickly. So at this point, he did a major assessment of his life to look at what was going wrong and to look at the changes that he needed to make. And he found the work of Seneca. Seneca says we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And so he started studying all of his writings. He found the practice of visualizing in detail the worst case scenario that you fear that is preventing you from taking the action so that you can overcome and take the action. So he said that he had a monkey mind and he can't just do it without actually writing it all down. So he came up with this exercise to put the thoughts on paper, create a written experience, and he called it fear setting as opposed to goal setting. So it's very simple. So I'm going to just go through what the steps are, and I hope that it's helpful for you to use whenever you're coming against fears that are getting in your way. The first page is you write down, what if I? Whatever you fear is causing you anxiety and you've been putting it off. In the first column, you define writing down all the worst things that can happen if you take the action. So what if I go to Peru? So write down 10 to 20 things that could go wrong. You need to have at least 10 to 20 of them and look at them and put them down on the first column. In the second column, you write down, what could I do to prevent each of these things from happening, or at least decrease the likelihood of them happening? And then the third column is repair. If the worst case scenario happens, what can I do to repair the damage, even a little bit? Who can I ask for help? And has anyone in the past overcome this and figured this out? So that's the first page, what if page. The second page is what might be the benefits of an attempt or a partial success. It will build confidence, you will develop skills, emotionally and financially you will grow. So he says the second page is all about writing down all of the benefits that you would get from doing this if you did succeed. And then the third page is all about the cost of inaction. What would happen if you didn't do anything? He says the atrocious cost of the status quo. If I avoid this action or decision, what might my life look like in 6 months, 12 months, 3 years? He said, get really, really detailed about this. What would it look like emotionally, physically, financially? What is the cost of not taking this action? He says, I can trace all of my biggest wins and all of my biggest disasters averted to doing fear setting. So let's go ahead and look at Scripture. Scripture talks over 365 times about fear not. And it's repeated in various different ways, but it always talks about giving up your fear to God and knowing that your faith is stronger than your fear. So I'm going to start with Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. When shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Psalm 46:1, God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake. John 14:27, peace I leave you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Deuteronomy 31:6, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And Lamentations 3:57, you came near when I called you, and you said, do not fear. I just love those. So let's go ahead and look at the metaphysical definition of fear according to the revealing word. It is the most destructive and subtle error that the carnal mind in man experiences. It is a paralyzer of mental action. It weakens both mind and body, hides the spiritual forces that are always with us. Blessed are those who deny ignorance and fear and affirm the presence and power of spirit. Butterworth talks about the belief in fear as an error in thinking. One of the greatest lessons learned in spirit and in truth is that there is nothing to fear. In Luke 10:19, Jesus said, I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Fear. Nothing will harm you. Always the mortal finds some kind of devil to fear. The spiritually wise man, clearly seeing in the light of divine understanding, knows that there is nothing to fear, knows that God loves and forgives his children. The child afraid of the dark is an apt illustration of childish minds of adults who live in the darkness of sense and who people that darkness with the imaginings of their own minds. This is Butterworth speaking. The grown man, fearless in the dark, is a figure of the spiritually illumined man who walks confidently and safely in the light of life. Of course, the error in our thinking seems real. Appearances are deceiving. Judge not according to appearances, it says in John 7:24. Whatever appears, change our appearance by changing your thoughts. Blame no one for conditions you do not like. Admit that you make your own world. Rise in the majesty of your true self and cast off all the works of darkness. So I found this great affirmation that we can all use. It's by Dr. G. Leroy Dale. He was a Unity minister as well. And he says, I am now afraid of, fill in the blank. What I have been using or feeling is only a picture in my mind. I now dissolve it and see myself as God sees me. Intelligent, kind, loving, peaceful, courageous, powerful, prosperous, happy, protected, guided, and free. And again, you started out with, I am not afraid of, and you fill in that blank. So here's what I know. Fear gets worse over time. The longer you put it off, the worse it gets. You can't talk yourself out of fear or reason yourself into obliterating it. You have to face it with so much love and gentleness, knowing it is your choice to do the thing, whatever it is. So because of a trauma that I experienced when I was very young, 9 years old, I have a very difficult time when I'm in a confined space and I can't get out of it, when I'm in the presence of someone who has the potential to hurt me. So where this shows up for me the most is at the dentist. And so I'm not someone who just has dental phobia. What I have has been so bad in the past. I have now worked through it, and I will hope that the lessons that I learned are helpful for you. But what happened to me when I was actually get into the dentist chair and I would pass out. And so as an adult, this continued on and on and on, and I went through a whole lot of dentists because they would say, we can't deal with you, we start to work with you and you pass out. And so after many years of this, I finally just stopped going to the dentist. And I didn't make a conscious decision to stop going. I just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off because it was such a problem. Not only was the dental work difficult for me, and sitting in the chair, but the anxiety and the overwhelming fear that I felt that was so strong that it caused me to literally pass out. So I realized that I had to acknowledge and accept this, and I found finally a dental phobia specialist, and I was able to say to them, I need nitrous. Most people don't like working with me because I pass out. And so while I don't need nitrous for the pain, so nitrous is that gas that you breathe that puts you in a very foggy place so that you can't experience overwhelming anxiety because you're basically just in a very, very foggy place. So I need the nitrous, and I need it just for an exam. I need it just for x-rays. And it was very embarrassing and shameful for me to have to admit that I needed it. Most people only take nitrous when they're actually going through some kind of like root canal. But I needed it just to have a regular exam because otherwise I would pass out. So it was very hard for me to face this. But only acknowledging and accepting that shift is where all of the growth came. And the fact is that I didn't get to that place until I was in state where I was in pain all the time. I was having a dental emergency, and I finally got pushed to the place where I had to deal with it, and I had to acknowledge it, and I had to go get this. But quite honestly, if I wasn't in this immense amount of pain, I'm not sure I would have forced myself to do it. The forcing myself to do it forced me to acknowledge that I was human, and that I have this condition, and that I will be able to work through it, but in the beginning I need help. So I had to parent myself. So I would give myself the whole day off when I would go to the dental appointment, and I would give myself something special to do afterwards so that I knew I had something to look forward to. I knew I wouldn't die. I knew it was going to be a growth experience. I just knew that it was going to be difficult. So I would pray a lot for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then I'd pray a lot on the day of the event leading up to the day. And so what finally happened was I got the appointment, and I went there, and I said to them, this is what happens to me. I pass out, I hyperventilate, and I get to this place where I can't even breathe, and I pass out, and I need the nitrous even just for the exam. And I found this incredibly wonderful dentist that was gentle and kind, and was able to help me. It turned out that I had 7 extractions that were needed. I had a very severe infection in my gums. And all that because I just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And that's why I started this off by saying that fear gets worse over time, and that the more you put it off, the worse it gets. And that if you can force yourself to deal with it sooner rather than later, the consequences will be minimized. So now I don't like it, but I can deal with it, and it's getting better and better every time. I have a new hygienist that I go when I get my teeth cleaned, and so they're very loving and kind. He puts a blanket over me because I tend to shake so much, and to keep me warm, and he gives me these silly children's sunglasses so that the glare won't hurt me from the big bright lights that are over my head. But he treated me with so much care and respect, and he constantly asked me, are you still okay? God was with me every single moment. It brought me to the exact right dentist, and the staff couldn't have been more loving and playful. So for me, feeding the fear means letting it grow and take on a life of its own until it becomes so big that it becomes absolutely insurmountable. It isn't. I've done a lot of really hard things in my life, and I've faced ridiculous danger. Ridiculous because I put myself in these positions of danger. This wasn't danger, and I had to talk myself into understanding that this was actually a really good thing that I was doing for myself. And I understand that part of the problem was not just the fear, but the shame and the embarrassment. And so I talked a little bit before about us having shame because we have fear. And so the shame was what was so hard for me, because I didn't want to admit that as an adult, here I was, a fully grown, mature woman, and I couldn't handle this. I wasn't able to get past it. But I had to move past that fear and acknowledge it and accept it and be loving and kind and gentle with myself and understand that that fear was something that I could work through. And so the shame had kept me from asking for help. The shame and embarrassment, I should be able to handle this. Don't feed the fear. Break the silence, talk about it, analyze it, break it down, be real with yourself and be real with someone else. God will help you if you ask for help, and so will other people. As soon as you are able to look in the mirror and tell yourself it's okay, you have nothing to be ashamed of, and go out there and do it, and say to some of your friends, hey, I'm going to need help with this. This is really hard for me. And then when you walk into whatever the fearful environment is, explain to them, this is really, really hard for me. I'm here and I'm going to do it, and I absolutely have all the faith in the world that I'm going to come out the other side of it, but this is really hard for me. And just acknowledging that and saying it out loud makes all the difference in the world. There is never, ever any reason to have shame about fear. And though you don't need to rush, the sooner you look at it and face it, the better. Feeding the fear is letting it get so big that it takes your breath away. Feeding the fear also takes all of your choices away. You don't need to do that ever again. Analyze the fear, what the worst case scenario is, how you would handle it, and what would happen if you don't handle it, just like I talked about before. The biggest cost is sometimes to your self-esteem, that you have to look in the mirror and accept that whatever is the fear is, that you have that fear. Butterworth said that belief in fear is an error in thinking. Fillmore said that it is the most destructive and subtle error that man ever experiences. Living in truth means trusting God will always provide the answers. Maybe it's going to hurt a little bit, but you will always be watched over and cared for by the God who created you, who wants you to be happy, joyous, and free. We can always handle it with God and the love of the people that are in our spiritual family. Don't ever, ever, ever feed the fear anymore. Ask for help. Get over the embarrassment. Get over the shame. Look yourself in the mirror and say, I am a child of God and I am bigger and bolder and stronger than I ever give myself credit for. Understand that God is with you every single moment of every single day. Remember at all times, the power is in you. It always has been, and it always will be. Thank you so very much. I'd love to hear from you. If fear and anxiety have gotten in the way of you doing things that you wanted to do, please let me know down below in the comments. I look forward to seeing you soon. Take very good care. I send you on your way with many blessings.